Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nixie coming back with another bullseye on the tutorial here today on the channel. So I actually wanted to talk about how I like to use analog model plugins as deharshers. So oftentimes if you find yourself doing very heavy de-essing, sometimes the thing about de-essers is that de-essers, no matter what, they're not instantaneous. So that means that they don't like work like a laser gun and zap the harshness through right away. So sometimes you might find yourself using multiple de-essers, and if you do use multiple de-essers, especially in rap music, depending on the flow of the rapper, sometimes you can start to hear like the pumping and the artifacts of the de-esser, because the de-esser has to release a consonant and grab onto another one, and it might be too slow for that. So the de-essing is never really like precise and transparent, which is what you kind of want. So if you guys do enjoy this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and also drop more suggestions down below. I also have a Patreon where I have exclusive content, and of course the free course is coming this month, so you guys have an idea of how we rocking on the Patreon. So let's not waste no time. I'm actually gonna just be talking about a couple plugins that I like to use a lot here. This is a song I've been playing a lot recently, and yes, the music video is gonna be coming out. So the main thing about it too is understanding back in the day. Back in the day, the whole way that their workflow was, they didn't have to worry about harshness. That's more of something that comes from, the digital age of recording, because now everything is precise, everything is clear and apparent. It's kind of like even like video and film back in the day, the same characteristics that you hear with analog tape, you can also see like in television and stuff like that. When you watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, just the whole way of the, the TV show and everything like that, like the cameras they recorded with it, it's a little bit easier on your eyes because of the way tape, handles like just stuff in general. So just like how people would be like, oh, watching these new TV shows, it's too harsh on my eyes because it's so precise and, it just fatigues my eyes. Some people may also say that, damn, listening to modern music is too crispy, it's too sharp, and, now I hear more of the harshness. So that's the thing that we got to think about too. I like to use a plugin like NLS, Bus, and I love using this preset. You guys see me use this preset so many times. So why do you keep using this preset, Nick? I like to use the NLS Bus mic preset, which is kind of like modeling an EMI console, because it has a deharshing, a smoothing characteristic. Back in the day, the whole way that their workflow was running through the console, running through the tape, it was like a situation where you take like a soft dough cookie and you put it under the oven. You know what I mean? So it was just a situation where it was starting to like slowly bake and, shape the edges of the audio signal essentially. So that's why when you hear a song from back in the day, you don't ever hear like crazy harshness problems, but it's not like they had plugins like SOOTHE. Like, think about it. Technology is supposed to make you do less, so people are using plugins like SOOTHE and Fab Filter and all that stuff like that, and they shit still sounds harsh. Versus back in the day, people didn't have all that fancy stuff, and their stuff sounds a little bit more smoother, and that's because of the whole workflow. So I love using something like the Mikey Emulation a lot of the times on my lead vocals, and I like using this because this one is bright. It's like a bright console emulation. So it's not like I'm losing fidelity or anything like that, right? I'm not losing the actual qualities. The vocals still remain bright coming out of this, but try this on your lead vocal, hit mic, and you will start to see like a little bit of the plosives and stuff like that will become not as apparent. I use that trick in many of my videos. Next thing I also like to use as well is I like to use something like the J37 tape, which is also a very interesting situation because you have something like biasing. So you got to understand with like biasing as well. Well, you can use the tape in a couple different ways, 2 different ways, right? You can use the tape as just kind of like how the NLS Bus channel. Sometimes I use the NLS and I use the J37 back to back. I put maybe one in front of the other or whatever. But what it will do is it will kind of work like a bodyguard, not allowing the harshness to come into the club, which is like my vocal group or maybe my lead vocal processing. Sometimes when you have those consonants and those harsh words, it can make like the rest of your signal chain work even harder, like your multiband or your compressors or something like that. Because usually like that high mid energy, right, where the harshness is at, that is what's gonna be like it might trigger the compressor, because there's a lot of fast transient field energy there. So that's kind of like a thing I always think about, transient management when it comes to my lead vocal. But coming back to the J37 tape though, you can use something like biasing to even make your vocals a little bit darker if you want. You know, you can use something like the under biasing to make it brighter. Like if you use the tape and you feel like, okay, now it's a little too smooth, not this plugin, but other plugins will let you do the under biasing, which will recover some of the brightness. Or what you can do is you can just straight up use like over biasing, and over biasing kind of has like a certain way of, you know, adjusting kind of like the high end as well, you know, how you tilt the seesaw. So that kind of brings me to the you know, the plugin I use so much, and people ask me why I use it. I use the MacDSP AC202 on like damn near every single song for like so long now, right? And the reason why I use it is because we got to understand like the frequency response of tape. So the reason why I use this as a gem, because it lets me do less de-essing. I use the you know, the stock Swiss preset on the MacDSP because it's kind of like doing that, as you guys can see right here, right? It's doing like that smoothing to the top end as well. So that's why I love using tape, because like, let's say like you got a lot of harshness, a lot of like a lot of that energy, a lot of the knife, a lot of the sharpness of the scissors, a lot of the sharpness of the blade, the sword, you know, the MacDSP AC202 or other tape types in general are beautiful because they will do some of that smoothing effect for you. They will soften kind of like the point of the harshness. Essentially, like if the vocal was like a nail and it was a little too sharp, it's gonna be like a clipper, like a toenail clipper or whatever, and come there and clip it off a little bit, you know, and just kind of round it off and make it not too pointy and like, you know, cat-like, you know, if that makes any sense. So yeah, understanding the frequency response of tape as well, and you see like there is a high-end roll-off. But that's the reason why I was talking about you know, under biasing and shit like that, over biasing and shit like that, because sometimes it can become a little bit too smooth. So that's why you would go with something like, you know, under biasing to bring back some of that brightness if it gets too smooth, as well as, you know, understanding the tape types. You know, sometimes you use a tape speed like 30 IPS, it has a better high-end frequency response, so it might be too bright. But if you use something like 7.5 for your ad-libs or something like that, I love to use it on the ad-libs, because in a way that it kind of has like a poorer high-end response and it makes things become a little bit darker. So that's another thing to understand as well. Also the channel strip that you kind of pick, you know, understand the topology of the channel strip that you're using. Usually if I want something that is like smooth, I might go with something like the Neve 88RS, because just literally running through that circuitry has like a smoothing top end effect to the you know, to the vocal. And I know that Tom Elhurst, he used this console when he was mixing Rolling in the Dells of Deep. So that's important to know, like, oh, why did he use that console how did he use that console to get that same sound? Because Adele's voice is very powerful. And of course, you know, with somebody who has a very powerful voice, of course they can be things like harshness or weird resonance, because she's hitting these really powerful notes for a very long time, you know. So that's another thing to also think about, the circuitry of the channel strip that you're using as well, you know what I mean? And the last thing I just wanted to bring up when it comes to like essentially de-harshing your you know, your vocals and all that stuff like that, is maybe using something like a transformer. Now I have actually the Neve 542s in front of me right now, and as you can see, like with the Neve 542s, let me see which light, like you see I have like a blue light right here. There's like two types of transformers. There's the red transformer, and then there's the blue transformer. So this kind of changed my mind a little bit. I always thought transformers as like just straight up the body, the beef, the meat, the butcher with the knife of the big T-bone steak. That's how I always seen transformers. But slowly I realized, you know, when it comes to the tonal seesaw, right? Like how your ears hear stuff, you know, if it hears less low end, then that means the high end comes up, and vice versa. I was like, man, sometimes if you add a little bit of low end via a transformer, or something that has like a little resonant bump, it kind of like distracts your ear from like any potential harshness, if that makes sense, you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh yeah, look over there. You know, if you're telling somebody to look over there and they have to turn around, they can't really see what's going on in front of them, which is you telling them to look over there, if that makes any sense. So sometimes if you add a little bit of that transformer warmth, what will happen is that the ear will kind of be distracted, so it won't be able to hear all that. So sometimes that's what you have to do too, is add a little bit of low mid to distract the listener. Hey, look over there. You know, you got to tell the listener, hey, like, hey, look over there. You hear that low mid? That's what you got to do as an engineer. You got to play mind games sometimes on the listener. So back to the point. the blue transformer on the Need 542s, it actually has a way of smoothing, literally rolling off the high end. So I was like, damn, transformers are not just about the low mid. And another great plugin like True Iron, a couple of the voicings here, if you use them, you will hear like it will kind of smooth out the high end as well. And I love to use that trick also with another plugin right here that is absolutely incredible. One last gem I'm gonna give y'all is if you use the Saturn II, and you can kind of like hone in on those you kind of hone in on the harshness. It might be like at 4.5K or above or whatever. You can also use like a multi-band saturator and drive it a little bit to also smooth out the vocal as well. You can use Saturn II as a de-esser, but it's not the same thing as a de-esser because the release and the attacking or the release is not audible. It doesn't really have an attacking or release that's audible. It really has a way of being kind of like a miner, inside of like a gold mine, and it's kind of like banging on that rock. It's banging in that mine, trying to find a diamond, trying to find the gold, which is the good part of your vocal, right? But in the process of the saturator banging up on the vocal, right, it's gonna be smoothing it out. Like when a miner goes into a cave, he starts banging on the cave. He might have had this big jagged rock that was sharp around the edges, but now that he's been banging on it with his axe, which is like a saturation of Saturn II, now it's like smooth and like now it's like all crisp and like, you know what I mean? It's a situation like that. So yeah, what you can do is you go on Saturn II and you like do multi-band. You locate where they're like, sometimes you can even just do it like this. Like, you don't even need a whole ass extra band. You just go to like 4.5K and up or whatever like that, and what you would do is that you would just start to drive a little bit of that too. Maybe sometimes you even want to use like old tape to give a little bit less fidelity to the top end. Or what you can do too is like you just go all the way to the top. You can go like all the way over here 5K and up and use like old tape and just use just a little bit of it, or use whatever type of tape that you want, whatever that is gonna pretty much put saturation on only the high mid where the harshness is at. So that's pretty much the end of the video that I have here today. I hope you guys was able to learn something. I hope I was able to teach you guys something. I'm pretty sure that, these techniques can definitely help you out if you try, taking a saturation type of approach to just the high end of your vocal. You can definitely get something that sounds way smoother without actually using de-essing. You know what I mean? And of course, like on my, EQ, sometimes I like to do a notch filter as well, but that's not really an analog thing. That's something that's an EQ. That's a static thing. So sometimes, you do a little notch on an EQ trying to notch out the harshness and it becomes audible. So that's why I think saturation is a better alternative for y'all. Learn how to use the NLS bus. Learn how to use the J37s and the True Irons and the MacDSP AC202. Learn how to use the FabFilter Saturn. Those plugins. Learn how to pick the right channel strip will make your life a lot easier when it comes to getting those bright, smooth, mainstream vocals. So I just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this now. Drop more video suggestions down below. Peace.